Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Fireside Tales for Wolfgang, episode 57. Yep, had to read that a second time. 57. Let me know if you can hear and see me. Greetings and salutations. There it is. All right, let's see here's who. Wow. I took a little nap before the show, can you tell? Christina Beeland is here. Hello, darling. Blonde Avenger, Meg Sampson. Melissa Catano. Kelsey Blaine Gibson. Hello. Dari Mills. Kathy B. Amanda Benjamin. Let's see. Anna Gianavola. Rhonda Soto. Hello. Joanne King. Hey, David. How you doing, man? Ruth Sanchez. My mom is here, Pam. All right. Make sure my connection is as strong as I can make it. Yes, it is. Olive and Ray say meow. All right. Well, I think I'll just jump right in here. Tonight's short story is by Kate Chopin. Thought I'd give you a little background on Kate, a little bio, as it were, before we start this evening's story. Excellent question, David. The answer will be forthcoming. Speaking of excellent questions, got a couple of doozies for you this evening, and one about space tech, and one not quite so much about space, but more like Earth than the air. So, here's the thing about Kate. So she was born in 1850. She died in 1904. And Kate Chopin set much of her writing in New Orleans. She spent a lot of years there as a young wife and as a mother. So one of the things that I find compelling about her is that she also sets several stories in St. Louis, where she was born and where I was born next to, if you will. And she moved to St. Louis, back to St. Louis, rather, 2 years after the death of her husband. Kate Chopin's second novel was called The Awakening, and it arrived during the feminist movement's first wave. So it was just extremely important for a lot of people. And this was when women were fighting for the right to vote, and they were looking for, just basic human autonomy. The heroine challenged society's expectations for women by daring to explore romance outside her marriage and gratification outside of motherhood. Seems daring, but such were the basics of how human society needed to be moved forward at the time. The story of the Awakening, it follows a wife and a mother whose flirtation with a young bachelor leads her to desire more from life. Who can't relate to that? The premise elicited widespread scorn when the book was published in 1899. She really never could have predicted its eventual road to critical acclaim. Revered for its realism, The Awakening is considered one of the first feminist works in American literature, as are her ever-popular short stories. Her first novel centered on a Creole widow who unexpectedly finds love with a dashing divorcee. From there, Chopin began writing for well-known magazines and published more than 100 short stories and essays. Her next two books were both short story collections. When The Awakening was published, she was a 49-year-old widow, and she had raised 6 children. Her husband, Oscar Chopin, had died of malaria in 1882 when Kate was 32. It's kind of staggering how many people, particularly in that era, died of malaria. According to a biographer, there's a direct quote, "For a while, the widow Kate ran his business and flirted outrageously with the local men. 2 years later, she sold the business, which was a general store and a plantation, and she moved to St. Louis to be closer to her mother. There, Chopin's obstetrician and family friends suggested writing might pull her out of a growing depression." Funny, because this is one reason that Mary Shelley got into writing. It's one reason that Mary Shelley turned Frankenstein from the short story into the full-length novel that it eventually became. She was, of course, dealing with the untimely demise of the love of her life, her husband, Percy Shelley. So yeah, Kate Chopin's obstetrician suggested that writing might pull her out of this growing depression, or maybe sinking depression. With this endeavor, she found a new passion and purpose. Following her death, critics and readers remembered her most often for her short stories. Her legacy remained that of a, I love this term, local colorist. The regional elements of her short stories were valued more highly than The Awakening's theme of female empowerment. By the early 1960s, second-wave feminism was changing the way Americans viewed women and society at large. The Awakening is now considered a classic. Contemporary critics and academics recognize that Chopin was ahead of her time by almost 100 years. Tonight's story, it's a little, Miss McEnders is almost vague as to whether it's set in St. Louis or if it is in New Orleans. So St. Louis was founded by a lot of French settlers. There's a lot of French names still used on streets and buildings, regions down there. Laclede's Landing, Soulard French. That's where the Blues neighborhood, Blues district is. A lot of French architecture in the older St. Louis buildings as well. So, Joe Warren says, my Grammy was a suffragette. Well, that's awesome. That is awesome. Welcome, Charity Swanson. Hello. Right, David Benjamin. If you don't count all the miles, I was born next to St. Louis too. Indeed, I guess it's really just kind of a matter of scale. So I recall, to answer your earlier question, David, Kate Chopin had a son named Frederick Chopin, and he's not the composer that you're thinking of. Damnedest thing to clear that up. So, So there's that. Natural question. Mom's saying yes. Soulard is French. Okay, so before I dive in, I want to also point out, of course, there's the virtual tip jar here, the Paymos, the Ven Pals, and I'm really digging having this email address. People from just kind of around the country are putting out questions from time to time. It's pretty neat. So if you have a question, just a question that you find interesting, doesn't have to be of a particular subject, just interesting questions, ask Hunter anything at gmail.com. And if I think I have something interesting to say on it, I will endeavor to put it in the show. Just as we will be doing tonight. As a matter of fact, just to give you a little preview, it's going to be time dependent, but the questions I would like to tackle is one question about the James Webb Space Telescope, which is finally slated to be launched on December 22nd. Where's it going? And why is the sky blue? A couple of really good questions this evening. Let's see what we have time to do justice in answering after this evening's story. So this story, I'm going to give Michelle a better slate. This story is Miss McEnders, published in 1897 by Kate Chopin. When Georgie McEnders had finished an elaborately simple appearance of gray and black, she divested herself completely of rings, bangles, brooches, everything to suggest that she stood in friendly relations with fortune. For Georgie was going to read a paper upon the dignity of labor before the Women's Reform Club, and if she was blessed with an abundance of wealth, she possessed a no less amount of good taste. Before entering the neat Victoria carriage that stood at her father's too sumptuous door, and that was her special property, she turned to give certain directions to the coachman. First upon the list from which she read was inscribed, "Look up Mademoiselle Salambre." James?" said Georgie, flushing a pretty pink, as she always did with the slightest effort of speech. "We want to look up a person named Mademoiselle Salambre in the southern part of town on Arsenal Street," indicating a certain number and locality. Then she seated herself in the carriage, and as it drove away, proceeded to study her appointment list further and to knit her pretty brows in deep and complex thought. 2 o'clock, look up Mademoiselle Salambre, said the list. 3:30, read paper before the Women's Club. 4:30, and here followed Kabbalistic abbreviations, which meant join committee of ladies to investigate moral condition of St. Louis factory girls. There it is, St. Louis. 6 o'clock, dine with Papa. 8 o'clock, hear Henry George's lecture on single tax. So far, Mademoiselle Salambre was only a name to Georgie McEnders, one of several submitted to her at her own request by her clothing furniture's Push and Prodham, an enterprising firm charged with the construction of Miss McEnders' very elaborate trousseau. Georgie liked to know the people who worked for her as far as she could. Miss McEnders was a charming young woman of 25, although almost too innocent and naive for a creature of flesh and blood. She possessed ample wealth and time to squander, and a burning desire to do good, to elevate the human race and start the world over again on a comfortable footing for everybody. Sounds like she's an idealist, right? When Georgie had pushed open the very high gate of a very small yard, she stood confronting a robust German woman who, with dress tucked carefully between her knees, was in the act of noisily redding the bricks. Just a sidebar. I'm really not absolute certain what redding bricks means, but I can only assume that it means she's like scraping off the algae and the lichens and soot and whatever else discolors and stains bricks, and she's literally down there like scraping the pavement and the cobblestoned walkway in front of the building to make the bricks red again. Does Mademoiselle Salambre live here? Georgie's tall, slim figure was very erect. Her face suggested a sweet peach blossom, and she held a severely simple lorgnette up to her short-sighted blue eyes. "Aye, ja, upstairs," cried the woman brusquely and impatiently, but Georgie did not mind. She was used to greetings that lacked the ring of cordiality. When she had ascended the stairs that led to an upper porch, she knocked at the first door that presented itself and was told to enter by Mademoiselle Salambre herself. The woman sat at an opposite window, bending over in a bundle of misty white goods that lay in a fluffy heap in her lap. She was not young. She might have been 30, she might have been 40. There were lines about her round, piquant face that denoted close acquaintance with struggles, hardships, and all manner of unkind experiences. Georgie had heard a whisper here and there touching the private character of Mademoiselle Salambre, which had determined her to go in person and make the acquaintance of the woman and her surroundings. The latter were poor and simple enough and not too neat. There was a little child at play upon the floor. Mademoiselle Salambre had not expected a guest such as Miss McEnders, and seeing the girl standing there at the door, she removed the eyeglasses that had assisted her in the delicate work and stood up also. Mademoiselle Salambre, I suppose? Said Georgie with a courteous inclination. Ah, Miss Sanders, what an agreeable surprise. Will you be so kind to take a chair? Mademoiselle had lived many years in the city in various capacities, which brought her in touch with the fashionable set. There were few people in polite society whom Mademoiselle did not know, by sight at least, and their private histories were as familiar to her as her own. You have come to see the work for you, the woman went on with a smile that quite brightened her face. It is a pleasure to handle such fine, such delicate quality of goods, miss. And she went and laid several pieces of her handiwork upon the table beside Georgie, at the same time indicating such details as she hoped would call forth her visitor's approval. There was something about the woman and her surroundings and the atmosphere of the place that affected the girl unpleasantly. She shrank instinctively, drawing her invisible mantle of chastity closely about her. Mademoiselle saw that her visitor's attention was divided between the lingerie and the child upon the floor, who was engaged in battering a doll's unyielding head against the unyielding floor. The child of my neighbor downstairs, said Mademoiselle with a wave of the hand which expressed volumes of unutterable ennui. But At that instant, the little one, with instinctive mistrust and in seeming defiance of the repudiation, climbed to her feet and went rolling and toddling toward her mother, clasping the woman about the knees and calling her by the endearing title which was her own small right. A spasm of annoyance passed over Mademoiselle's face, but she still called the child Chérie as she grasped its arm to keep it from falling. Miss McEnders turned every shade of carmine. "Why did you tell me an untruth?" she asked, looking indignantly into the woman's lowered face. "Why do you call yourself Mademoiselle if the child is yours?" "For the reason that it is more easy to obtain employment. For reasons that you would not understand," she continued, with a shrug of the shoulders that expressed some defiance and a sudden disregard for consequences. "Life is not all couleur de rosé, Miss McEnders. You do not know what life is. You..." And drawing a handkerchief from an apron pocket, she mopped an imaginary tear from the corner of her eye and blew her nose till it glowed again. Georgie could hardly recall the words or actions with which she had acquitted Mademoiselle's presence. As much as she wanted to, it had been impossible to stand and read the woman a moral lecture. She had simply thrown what disapproval she could into her hasty leave-taking, and that was all for the moment. But as she drove away, a more practical form of rebuke suggested itself to her not too nimble intelligence, one that she promised herself to act upon as soon as her home was reached. When she was alone in her room, during an interval between her many engagements, she then attended to the affair of Mademoiselle Salambre. Georgie believed in discipline. She hated unrighteousness. When it pleased God to place the lash in her hand, she did not hesitate to apply it. Here was this Mademoiselle Salambre living in her sin, not as one who is young and blinded by the glamour of pleasure, but with cool and deliberate intention. Since she chose to transgress, she ought to suffer and be made to feel that her ways were iniquitous and invited rebuke. It lay in Georgie's power to mete out a small dose of that chastisement which the woman deserved, and she was glad that the opportunity was hers. She seated herself forthwith at her writing table and penned the following note to her furnitures: Messieurs Push and Prodham. Gentlemen, please withdraw from Mademoiselle Salambre all work of mine and return same to me at once, finished or unfinished. Yours truly, Georgie McEnders. On the second day following this summary proceeding, Georgie sat at her writing table, looking prettier and pinker than ever, in a luxurious and soft-toned dressing gown that suited her own delicate coloring and fitted the pale amber tints of her room decorations. There were books, pamphlets, and writing material set neatly upon the table before her. In the midst of them were 2 framed photographs, which she polished one after another with a silken scarf that was near. One of these was a picture of her father, who looked like an Englishman, with his clean-shaved mouth and chin and closely cropped side whiskers just turning gray. A good-humored shrewdness shone in his eyes. From the set of his thin, firm lips, one might guess that he was in the foremost rank in the interesting game of push that occupies mankind. One might further guess that his cleverness in using opportunities had brought him there, and that a dexterous management of elbows had served him nonetheless. The other picture was that of Georgie's fiancé, Mr. Meredith Holt. Approaching more closely than he liked to his 45th year and an unbecoming corpulence. That means he was a bit overweight. He was a good-looking and amiable man of the world who might be counted on to do the gentlemanly thing, always. Georgie was going to marry him because his personality pleased her, because his easy knowledge of life commended itself to her approval, and because he was likely to interfere in no way with her work. Yet, she might not have given any of these reasons if asked for one. Mr. Meredith Holt was simply an eligible man whom almost any girl in her set would have accepted for a husband. Georgie had just discovered that she had yet an hour to spare before starting out with a committee of 4 to further investigate the moral condition of the factory girl, when a maid appeared with the announcement that a person was below who wished to see her. A person? Surely not a visitor at this hour. Right, I left her in the hall, miss, and she says her name is Mademoiselle oh, yes. Ask her to kindly walk up to my room and show her the way, please, Hannah. Mademoiselle came in with a sweep of skirts that bristled defiance and a poise of the head that was aggressive in its backward tilt. She seated herself and with an air of challenge waited to be questioned or addressed. Well, Georgie felt at ease amid her own familiar surroundings. While she made some idle tracings with a pencil upon a discarded envelope, she half turned to say, "This visit of yours is very surprising, madam, and wholly useless. I suppose you guessed my motive in recalling my work as I have done." Maybe I do, and maybe I do not, McEnders," replied the woman with an impertinent uplifting of the eyebrows. Georgie felt the same shrinking which had overtaken her before in the woman's presence, but she knew her duty, and from that there was no shrinking. "You must be made to understand, madam, that there is a right way to live and that there is a wrong way," said Georgie with more condescension than she knew. "We cannot defy God's laws with impunity and without incurring his displeasure, but in his infinite justice and mercy, he offers forgiveness, love, and protection to those who turn away from evil and repent. It is for each of us to follow his divine way as well as may be, and I am only humbly striving to do his will." "A most charming sermon, McEnders," Mademoiselle interrupted with a nervous laugh. "It seems a great pity to waste it upon so small an audience, and it grieves me. I cannot express that I have not the time to remain and listen to it close." She arose and began to talk volubly, swiftly, in a jumble of French and English, with a wealth of expression and gesture which Georgie could hardly believe was natural and not something acquired and rehearsed. She had come to inform McEnders that she did not want her work, that she would not touch it with the tips of her fingers, and her little gloved hands recoiled from an imaginary pile of lingerie with an unspeakable disgust. Her eyes had traveled nimbly over the room and had been arrested by the 2 photographs on the table. Very small, indeed, were her worldly possessions, she informed the young lady, but, as heaven was her witness, not a mouthful of bread that she had not earned. And her parents were over in France, as honest as the sunlight, poor. Ah, for that, poor as rats. God only knew how poor, and God only knew how honest. Her eyes remained fixed upon the picture of Horace McEnders. Some people might like fine houses and servants and horses and all the luxury which dishonest wealth brings. Some people might enjoy such surroundings. As for her, she drew up her skirts ever so carefully and daintily, as though she feared contamination to her petticoats from the touch of the rich rug upon which she stood. Georgie's blue eyes were filled with astonishment as they followed the woman's gestures. Her face showed aversion and perplexity. "Please, let this interview come to an end at once," spoke the girl. She would not deign to ask an explanation of mysterious allusions to ill-gotten wealth, but Mademoiselle had not yet said all that she had come there to say. "If it was only me to say so," she went on, still looking at the likeness, "but, chère Miss, go yourself, Miss McEnders, and stand for a while on the street and ask the people passing by how your dear papa has made his money. See what they will say." Then, shifting her glance to the photograph of Meredith Holt, she stood in an attitude of amused contemplation, with a smile of commiseration playing about her lips. "Mr. Meredith Holt," she pronounced with quiet, suppressed emphasis. "Ah, c'est un propre, soit-le-là. This one is a proper one, this one here. You know him very well, no doubt, Miss McEnders. You would not care to have my opinion of Mr. Meredith Holt. It would make no difference to you, Miss McEnders, to know that he is not fit to be the husband of a self-respecting barmaid. Oh, you know a good deal, my dear young lady. You can preach sermons marvelously." When Georgie was finally alone, there came to her, through all her disgust and indignation, an indefinable uneasiness. There was no misunderstanding the intention of the woman's utterances in regard to the girl's fiancé and her father. A sudden, wild, defiant desire came to her to test the suggestion which Mademoiselle Salambre had let fall. Yes, she would go stand there on the corner and ask the passers-by how Horace McEnders made his money. She could not yet collect her thoughts for calm reflection, and the house stifled her. It was fully time for her to join her committee of 4, but she would meddle no further with morals till her own were adjusted, she thought. Then she quitted the house, very pale, even to her lips that were tightly set. Georgie stationed herself on the opposite side of the street, on the corner, and waited there as though she had appointed to meet someone. The first to approach her was a kind-looking old gentleman, very much muffled for the pleasant spring day. Georgie did not hesitate an instant to accost him. "I beg pardon, sir. Will you kindly tell me whose house that is?" pointing to her own domicile across the way. "Oh, yeah, that's Mr. Horace McEnders' residence, madam," replied the old gentleman, lifting his hat politely. "Could you tell me how he made the money with which to build so magnificent a home?" "Oh, you should not ask indiscreet questions, my dear lady," answered the mystified old gentleman as he bowed and walked away. The girl let 1 or 2 persons pass her. Then she stopped a plumber who was going cheerily along. with his bag of tools on his shoulder. I beg pardon, began Georgie again, but may I ask whose residence is that across the street? Oh, yes'm. That's the McEnders's. Thank you. And can you tell me how Mr. McEnders made such an immense fortune? Oh, that ain't my business, but they say he made the biggest pile of it in the whiskey ring. So, the truth would come to her somehow. These were the people from whom to seek it, who had not learned to veil their thoughts and opinions in polite subterfuge. The whiskey ring. The whiskey ring. The whiskey ring. When a careless little newsboy came strolling along, she stopped him with the apparent intention of buying a paper from him. Pardon, do you know whose house that is? She asked him, handing him a piece of money and nodding over the way. Why, it's old Miss McEnders' house. I wonder where he got the money to build such a fine house. He stole it. That's where he got it. Thank you, he said, pocketing the change which Georgie had declined to take, and he whistled a popular air as he disappeared around the corner. Georgie had heard enough. Her heart was beating violently now, and her cheeks were flaming, so everybody knew it, even to the street urchins. The men and women who visited her and broke bread at her father's table knew it. Her co-workers, who strove with her in Christian endeavor, knew it. The very servants who waited upon her, doubtless, knew it, and had their jests about it. She shrank within herself as she climbed the stairway to her room. Upon the table there she found a box of exquisite white spring blossoms that a messenger had brought from Meredith Holt during her absence. Without an instant's hesitation, Georgie cast the spotless things into the white, sooty fireplace. Then she sank into a chair and wept bitterly. So she had a character arc. Hate to be too biblical about it, but it seems apt. Let he who be free of sin cast the first stone. Here she starts out as this crusader against moral indemnity with a very simple view of life, that there's a right way to live and a wrong way to live, and damn, it turns out every aspect of her life and fortune was put together by her father, who either reputedly stole it or made it by selling whiskey in the whiskey ring. Then her fiancé, at the end, what a wonderful metaphor, sends her this box of white flowers, and she can't even look at them. She's got to, like, this represents her innocence. She throws them in the sooty fireplace. Well-deserved, but still kind of feel sorry for her. That's the thing, David. Like, having one's awareness expanded is frequently an uncomfortable process. learning is hard. Learning truths one would otherwise reject about oneself is harder, but you learn even more. Yeah, okay, so Mom was saying Arsenal Street in St. Louis. That's the original part of old St. Louis. The Whiskey Ring was started in St. Louis. Okay. Great question from Christina. The rule for knowing when to say persons and when to say people. Mom is much more qualified to answer that in the chat. I see that she did. Thank you. Oh, Paul, that's very sweet. Every time I hear Hunter's accents, I'm reminded of how much I miss hearing Hunter's accents. Thank you, sir. And by the way, I'm down to do the POVS show in December, as I believe it is on a Thursday. So let's coordinate it with the Lovecast. Angelica, glad to see you could join us. I thought Angelica was not going to be able to join us this evening for unfortunate circumstances. I'm glad to see you here with us. Yes, Paul always sparkles. Is it David's birthday tomorrow? What? Well, David, happy almost birthday. I'll definitely be tuning into David's show, The Panano Man, tomorrow. Thanks. He says, I'm playing mostly ragtime, Joplin, Dabney, plus one piece each by Dvorak and Schubert. Should be a good show. Well, yeah, man. Looking forward to that. Okay, so we'll move to the Paul holiday episode, December 23rd. I did get that right? It is a Thursday. Didn't actually look at that on my calendar. I think it's Thursday. In any case, I'm down. All right, David. Congratulations. David is hitting the big 45 tomorrow. He's actually just referring to this huge handle of beer, the 45 ounce, and I think it coincidentally corresponds to his age. Congratulations, sir. This is what happens when you keep not dying. And speaking of not dying, let's start off with, that's a totally irrelevant transition. A few people have now collectively asked in one way or another, why is the sky blue? This question comes from my mom, Pam, and my goddaughter, Bay, actually asked me this about 2 weeks ago. And I also got an email from Paul in Oklahoma. Why is the sky blue? Okay, so this is a really good question. For those of you with any kind of physics or engineering background, I'm going to give this answer in terms of something called Rayleigh scattering. You don't have to remember that term to follow the logic on how this works. Don't worry about it. So why do we see colors the way that we see them? That's the first thing that we've got to address. We see, you know the expression Roy G. Biv? This is all the colors of the rainbow, right? Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Yeah? So the way that those colors, as I just now recited them, you can also think of those in terms of wavelength. Red, orange, these are at the longer end of the wavelengths. Now, all I mean by wavelength is if you think about light as a wave, the wavelength is just, let's say, the distance between the high point of one wave to the high point of the next wave, or the low point of one wave to the low point of the next wave, however you want to splice it up. The wavelengths of, say, the red lights, or red light, are farther apart. They're longer. It's a longer wave. As you get to the blue end of the scale, they're very, very short wavelengths. And like the greens, what is it? Roy G. Biv. So yellow, green, are kind of in the middle, all right? So in our analogy, let's say that the long wavelengths of light are like a Mack truck, like these are your reds. And so they got like a lot of momentum behind them. It's hard to stop them comparatively, all right? And the ones that are in the middle, let's just say green. Green's like a regular car. And then as we go further down in our Roy G. Biv toward blue, let's say that let's say that on the blue end of things, you've got like an electric scooter, like a Lime or a Bird scooter. All right. So Mack truck on the red end, little tiny scooter on the blue end, and all your other like regular cars are kind of in the middle of the visible light. All right. Now, first we're going to say, why can we see the sky as any color at all? So what's happening here? Well, imagine air as being made up of little tiny air particles, molecules. Definitively safe to call them molecules, all right? Now, the little tiny molecules of air, it's mostly oxygen, it's mostly nitrogen, then oxygen, then like 1% all the other things of like carbon dioxide and other little gases. But like 78% of it's nitrogen and about 21% of it is oxygen. These molecules are just big enough that imagine these as like roadblocks, all right? And as light is coming from the sun, when we see all the colors together, that's how we see white light. So if you're looking straight at the sun, public service announcement, don't look straight at the sun. Don't drink bleach. Don't eat Tide Pods. And again, don't look straight at the sun. You can call it yellow, but this is really white light with a bit of a yellow tint to it. All right. So basically, we're getting all of the visible colors of light coming from the sun, and that's why it looks white. As the sunlight goes through the air, you got these little tiny roadblocks that are only big enough to scatter the blue end of the spectrum. Again, this is the short wavelengths. These are the people on electric scooters. Those people don't have enough momentum to bust through the air molecules. Those are the wavelengths of light that get scattered. All the other wavelengths of light manage to get through the barrier. And because the air molecules scatter the blue light toward your eyes, that's the only color that you end up seeing. You see the sky as blue because it preferentially scatters the tiny, tiny wavelengths of blue light right into your eyes. So that's why the sky is blue. And we can also use that exact same reasoning to infer as to why are clouds white? Well, clouds are made up of water vapor, and the water molecules are considerably larger than the little tiny air molecules that I was talking about a second ago. The water molecules are large enough to block all the colors, including the Mack truck red length. So the white comes from all of the colors being scattered equally across the spectrum of your vision. All the reds, the oranges, the blues, the indigos, the violets, the greens, all of it. So by the time it hits your eye, you're getting the same mix of all the colors that you were getting from the sun scattered pretty equally toward your eye. Now, on the other hand, why are sunrises and sunsets red? So, when you're looking straight at the sun, as we've already said, don't do, the light is passing through as little air as possible. This is when the sun is, like, say, directly above you or just kind of generally in the sky above you. It's passing through just a very thin veil of air to get to your eye. So as we already said, the blue is preferentially scattered out of this. On the other hand, when the sun is low in the sky, now it's going through a really fat cross section. It's kind of like going diagonally through the air. It's going through a lot more air before it gets to your eyes. So now when that happens, all of the colors are being scattered except the Mack truck of the longest wavelength, red. Those are the only ones getting through to your eyes at that point. And so the sunset to our eyes appears red. The guy that figured this out was a man, a lord, named Rayleigh, Lord Rayleigh. And yeah, so that is Rayleigh scattering. If you want to look up anything about this in a technical sense, you would describe this as, oh, I just remembered the formula. I is a variable that represents the overall scattering. I equals 1 over lambda to the 4th power. Lambda is just the wavelength of light. So basically we have the wavelength of light times itself, times itself, times itself again as deciding what gets scattered. But because it's in the bottom half of a fraction, the smaller the number in the bottom half of a fraction, the larger that number ends up being. So the output result is that the tiny, tiny little wavelengths to the 4th power get scattered a lot. All right, let me glance up into the chat and see if I missed anything I absolutely have to address. Oh, cool. Okay, so the holiday show is going to happen on a Thursday. It's scheduled for 7 p.m., but if I go late, we will wait, Paul says. It's very, very, very considerate, very kind. Yes, Kathy B. Don't look directly at the sun. Oh, Dari Mills. Also, don't look into the eyes of weeping angels. Don't blink. Blink and you're dead. Doctor Who, right? Creepy fucking episode. Jesus. Rufio. Yeah, I met the guy once, twice. Related question, why do sunsets usually seem far more colorful than sunrises? Probably because you're a little drunker at that point. I'm really not sure. Yeah, I've heard a lot of artists, I've heard a lot of photographers say that sunrises look different than sunsets. I can't really account for them, for that in terms of like its actual physical appearance. All I know is that sunsets are a wonderful celebration of life for me. Sunrises I see as, ooh, I did not get any sleep, and now the sun's, oh, this day is really gonna suck. So sunrises always portend doom and a very bad following 24 hours for me. Thus, they look subjectively different to my eyes. Rhonda Soto. Hello, Rhonda. Why has the sun changed to more white than orange-yellow, aside from the wavelength just discussed? Becoming a star? Okay, so the answer to that one is, I can answer that. It's essentially because of the lack of colors that it puts off on the upper wavelength. So it's the sun is not putting off very much in the indigo violet upper end of that spectrum. And so those colors are not countering and thus making more white the longer wavelengths. Does that make sense? So white light is again comprised of like all the visible colors, and the sun, our sun, is preferentially putting off a little more of the yellow orange and a little less of the indigo violet. That's really what that amounts to. It's just the type of radiation that our sun produces as it goes through its hydrogen fusion process. No, it's not because it is becoming a star. It is just what our particular star is doing with its particular type of fuel. And it's got a little less blue and indigo and violet going on there. Let's see. Okay, another semi-related question that has a cool answer. Why are there no green stars? Why have red, orange, yellow, white, and blue, but no green? Great question. So there are some greens. Green is just never the predominant color. The green is always just drowned out by other colors that it's making. I'm going to cut it off there. It's kind of similar to why does our sun look more like orangish yellow in its tint. And yeah, it really comes up, the color that a star appears has more to do with the other colors that it is lacking in what it produces. And but I'll tell you this, you have 3 color receptors in your eyes. You've got red, green, and blue. All the colors that you see are some combination of those color receptors. If we had evolved differently, such that, for example, we had no red receptors, dogs and cats, by the way, have no red receptors. They only have green and blue, I believe. And if you only had green receptors, all stars would look green to you. So it's as much a question of how we see as what kind of light the various stars are putting out. Hey, Deep Sky Dude is here. Good to see you, man. Let's see. Amanda Benjamin, I've heard a theory that it's more about how your eyes are adjusted to light at different times. Okay, so there's something else going on there. How your light adjusts, or how your eyes adjust to light at different times, is a phenomenon that you can replicate. I actually did this in a theater class. A theater class I was a student in. My bachelor's degree is a double major of physics and theater performance, so I had to take some theater tech classes. One of the most fascinating experiments that I ever personally experienced was my lighting design teacher did a lecture in the theater in which she turned all the lights off except the deepest red lights. Nothing on in there except absolute, just bathed in red light. All right. We probably sat in there and talked for, 5-10 minutes or so. And after a while, your brain kind of adjusts and your brain starts sort of inferring the other colors that your eyes aren't actually seeing. So this is kind of like a hardware-software balance. Your eyes are the hardware, your brain is the software. The software, your brain, starts compensating for all the other colors that you're not seeing and starts to just kind of like infer those colors to be there, even though they're not literally there. The same way that I could draw a triangle to your mind by literally making 3 points, and your brain will sort of like imagine lines connecting that. You'll see 3 points and you can imagine a triangle pretty easily, right? Your brain does the exact same thing in the absence of normal colors, so then the really cool, fascinating conclusion to this theater experiment was then my professor turned back on all the regular lights. So it went from totally awash in nothing but deep red to now normal lighting. And I'll be damned, everything looked green, because my brain was still adding green to sort of complementary color, like the offset to make everything look normal. And my brain was still doing that when she turned on all of the other regular lights. It was one of the most visually surprising things that I had ever experienced at that point in my life that did not involve psychedelics. So that's what's going on, I think, in Amanda Benjamin's observation about a theory that it's more about how your eyes are adjusted to light at the different times. That might be relevant to why sunrises and sunsets look different to the artists. Obviously, sunrise is following darkness and sunset is following brightness, right? So that might be very, very relevant. But I don't know, photographers in their final, like photographers should be not so subjective in their actual photograph, and that seems like it should be relevant. So I'm not sure. That doesn't seem like a very complete answer. Oh, Meg Sampson says, it's the light through the pollution of the day. Okay, interesting point. That sounds very plausible. Yeah, that sounds very plausible to me. Joe Warren, can you tell us about the new album Tim Bloom is producing for you? So Tim and I haven't really worked out the details yet. I'm going to be recording, the first 3 days of sessions are going to be June 7, 8, and 9 at his studio. And we haven't yet we just really haven't developed whether or not is this just going to be me and vocals and guitar, or is it going to be me, a lot of instruments and all the vocals, or are we going to have like the Dirty Jacks come in, or studio cats, or local guys, maybe the Coffis Brothers? We don't know yet. It is based around the premise, though, that I need a really good recording of Lost in the Minute and another song I wrote during the pandemic, I'd Mutiny for You. I've also got just a handful of other songs that I've written and developed over the years that I've just never done anything with yet. And Tim is down to do this as an acoustic-driven recording session, whatever that results in. Dari, isn't it that sunrises and sunsets have a variable of different temperatures and the chemical variables in the air around the specified times, and especially during different seasons? That would perfectly piggyback and coincide with Meg's Blonde Avengers answer about pollution, and sounds plausible to me. Sounds very plausible. Smog is one of the reasons that Florence sunsets. Florence, Italy, are just some of the most incredible sunsets in the world. That's one of the few things that pollution has improved, I say with a lot of chagrin. Florence was pretty enough before the pollution. Now it's somehow even prettier with a little grime and grit in the air. Deep Sky Dude says, our sun is actually a yellow-green star, but our eyes don't pick that up very well. Stars come in basically every color, but our eyes aren't good at showing us that, unfortunately. Okay, so that's kind of piggybacks on what I had said about, like, if you had evolved in a different way, you could have evolved such that literally all stars looked green and nothing but green, but, you know, nature did not shake it out that way. How long do we get to live after the sun explodes? It's like 4 minutes, right? So, Paul, that's a wow, morbid hypothetical. Okay, so the sun is about 8 light minutes away, 8 and some change. So if it were to just, for some reason, without any forecast or anything, to just like instantaneously explode right now, that would be your answer. It would be about 8 minutes and a fraction. And but if it happened that instantaneously, we wouldn't see it first. We would have no warning. That's just kind of going into the if it just spontaneously exploded for no reason that physics can currently account for, it would be about 8.5 minutes. As I recall off the top of my head, the sun in its current configuration has about 4 billion years of hydrogen fuel left. Maybe it's 5, 4 to 5. When it runs out of hydrogen, it's going to then convert to burning helium, because helium is nuclear fusible the same way that hydrogen is. It just doesn't do it quite as easily. When it does do that, eventually, it's going to swell up. And it's going to swell up all the way to the degree that it is going to get so big that it's going to encompass where the Earth currently is. It's going to swallow up Mercury, Venus, Earth. I think I read once upon a time a projection that maybe some of the moons of Jupiter are going to become rather tropical at that point. But everything in the solar system is going to suck. And David's now saying the sun won't explode, Paul. It'll expand to a red giant, which will finish incinerating Earth and Venus and Mercury, and then blow off its outer layers into a planetary nebula and become a white dwarf. Wait, is our sun going to become a white dwarf, or is our sun going to become a red dwarf after? Anyway, I have to go through a little bit of stellar evolution and come back. But yeah, it's gonna swell up, and then it's gonna explode, and everything's gonna suck. Okay, and Deep Sky Dude can confirm, and David is right. The sun isn't big enough to supernova. Will become what's known as a planetary nebula. That's some of my favorite objects in a telescope. They're all so different. Cool. Yeah, so here's the catch, Paul. I knew the 8-minute thing. This is Paul's comment. I knew the 8-minute thing, but I thought the radiation would kill us first. All light is radiation. The technical name for visible light is electromagnetic radiation. This all light that you cannot see, light that is shorter wavelengths in context of what we were saying earlier with why is the sky blue and Rayleigh scattering, light that is bluer than your eyes can see, and longer wavelengths that are redder than your eyes can see. This is all still electromagnetic radiation. The sun does put out a number of kinds of radiation, and yeah, it'll kill you. But you know, wear your sunscreen. That's why you wear your sunscreen. It's morbid but true. Amanda, my brain absolutely has autocorrect. It even fixes people's typos for me 90% of the time. Funny, because my brain only fixes my own typos for me, say 80% of the time, and that's why I'm a terrible speller and only sometimes know it. Let's see. Deep Sky Dude, again, my chat just jumped. Damn it, I lost it. Here we go. Well, yeah, this is from Deep Sky Dude. Well, yeah, as the sun expands, the oceans and atmosphere blow away long before the sun fully goes poof. Yeah, so Earth is going to be a very uncomfortable place to be. I mean, if there's anything around that at that point is describable as human descendant, Homo nexus, for example, one of two things will happen. Either we will have, no, you know what? I'll say one of three things will happen as I just sit here and imagine. We will have left the solar system. That's an easy one. One possibility. A second possibility is that we will have somehow prevented the sun from running out of hydrogen and thus swelling, etc. I have no idea how this would be done, but one of my favorite quotes comes from Arthur C. Clarke's, I think it was 1976 book. Maybe it was later. Maybe he wrote the book is called The Last Theorem. Maybe he wrote that in the 80s. You probably heard this quote before. Hell, I probably used it on the show before. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So us leaving the solar system sounds kind of magical to me, but, you know, we've seen it in Star Trek. It doesn't seem that far-fetched given the era that we've all grown up in. Refueling the sun's hydrogen so that it precisely does not expand and consume the Earth, etc., could be a solution. Again, I don't know how that would be done, but if you could give the sun more hydrogen, that would fix it. The third possibility I could see is either moving the sun or moving the Earth. And again, this is going to be technology that is indistinguishable from magic. However, this I can say, none of those three things actually violate anything in physics that I'm aware of. I don't know how to do it. I don't even know how to suggest going about it. But I don't know of any physical law that any of those three things would violate. Oh yeah, Paul just now. Paul says Hunter is explaining what my brain does in my rose-colored snowboarding goggles. Paul's clearly referring to the all red light experiment. So when you put your rose-colored glasses on, not just a metaphor for optimism, and you wear them long enough that everything kind of looks normal again. When you take those off, things look kind of funky. And probably greenish. Let's see. David says, as the sun starts to fuse heavier elements, it'll expand. This will end life on Earth long before it expands to a red giant and swallows the Earth. I concur. Okay, yeah, Mom's saying photographers have to change settings for sunrise and sunset. Yeah. Let's see, Hunter, this is from David Benjamin. Hunter, one theory on sunsets is that there are more hydrocarbons in the air that result in more colors. I'll just tag that onto the pollution answer. We can sort of tie those into smog. Amanda, I don't know if I'll need backup vocalists. Just knocking out the things now. But I will definitely keep you in mind if I do. Just like fires and volcanoes, just like fires and volcanoes give us some amazing sunsets. Yes, I concur. Thank you, Deep Sky Dude. Hunter knows his shit. That's coming from an astronomer. I'm extremely flattered by that. 4.5 billion years left. Cool. Paul, I haven't smoked weed in over a decade, but I feel like I need to, right? Meow. Yes, Paul, no time like the present. Let's see. Smoke it if you got it. Yeah. Okay. Dari, question. Could, in the future of technology, some type of super technological advanced race feed the sun hydrogen? Okay, clearly I'm just like way behind in my in the chat of what I've already said. Deep Sky Dude concurs, absolutely, Dari. Amanda, not a supernova, just the regular kind. But as Deep Sky Dude again points out, but we need so many more. Damn it, my chat just jumped. But we need so much tech advances before that's possible. Yep. So, okay, interesting point from Dari. Really depends which will kill us first. Andromeda, the black hole, or our own sun. So I'm less worried about Andromeda because, and I think I might have addressed this on this show before. So atoms are mostly empty space, right? If you blow up the nucleus of an atom to, say, the size of a softball, the nearest thing to that nucleus, that softball-sized nucleus, is going to be about a superdome away. And then the nearest nucleus to that would be another superdome over. All right? So galaxies are similarly mostly empty space, but on an even bigger scale. The thing is that when the Milky Way and Andromeda collide, it's more like they're going to pass through each other and gravitationally deform each other concurrently. And so any actual body in this mix may be just fine, or it may not. It's not so much the fear that our sun or that the Earth is going to collide into something else. It's more like maybe some large gravitational body from Andromeda, or that is disrupted from from our own galaxy, the Milky Way, like maybe Proxima b, for example, might get pulled over toward us, and then the Earth sort of gets dislodged from its pretty stable orbit around the sun and starts following another gravitational object. And who's to say that if it did that it would fall into anything resembling a stable orbit around this other new object? So chances, if something bad happens to the sun and or the Earth and or our solar system, it's probably not like a crashing collision problem. It's probably more like a just sort of pulled out of balance and gets sort of floats away into empty space, which still sucks. Let's see. But if we feed the sun hydrogen, that'll add mass. Yes, it would, which would make it fuse hydrogen faster, increasing its luminosity and temperature, which will increase its radiative output, which would kill us. Yes, it would, but we use fossil fuels to run the air conditioner. We are not above such things. Amanda says, we'll really just be colonizing other planets at that point anyway. Maybe. We may also evolve a form of space travel that completely obfuscates the need for planets at all. There's a lot of hypotheticals. We can go down that road. Deep Sky Dude, we do have lots of time, though. Yes. Blonde Avenger, yeah, that really sucks, but we won't have the time to notice. Okay. Here's Deep Sky Dude with the summary. Dari, it's funny, a lot of bad shit starts to happen at 4.5 billion years from now. The sun expands, we lose the moon, the Andromeda Galaxy will start to merge with the Milky Way. Yeah. Yep. David Benjamin, moving the Earth, gravitational tug, such as a large asteroid tugging on the moon to then tug on the Earth over a couple billion years might do the trick. I think SFIA, Science Fiction and Futurism with Isaac Arthur, did an episode on what it would take to move stars, and probably included in that same episode move rocky planetary bodies. But alas, I have not watched that episode. I think I just remember seeing it in his list of titles. But yeah, you got it. I think it's going to be by gravitational attraction, and certainly not by like something pushing and like smashing the Mongolian steppes or something. That would just suck. Dari, the only person who'd still be around would be the Time Lord, Hunter, aka the Doctor. He'll fix it. It'll be fine. I tell you what, Dari, no promises, but I'm going to try to live that long. Okay, what is Paul saying? I don't got it. Okay, wait. I know what he. Okay, now I'm just that far behind on the chat. That's okay. Okay, Dari, we've discussed Andromeda, just us, but I don't remember if you also said it on the show. That would make sense. Paul, question: if we found out we're all gonna die tomorrow at midnight, what would you do? And why would it be throw a party with Hunter and I? Cheers, man. Yeah. I'm down for the end of the world as we know it party. That is, yep, I'm totally down. All right. I think that just about brings us... Oh dear, Mom. Yeah. I think that brings us to a close. So I wanted to say a little bit about the James Webb Space Telescope, but I'm running way over on time here. So I will reiterate that one thing I've said before, the James Webb Space Telescope is slated currently to be launched in December 22nd, which is a Wednesday, I believe. And, by the time we do the holiday party show, we'll have a little update on the James Webb Space Telescope launch. This thing is going to revolutionize what we know about the universe and hopefully our place in it. This thing is going to make the Hubble telescope look like a Fisher-Price microscope by comparison. If it deploys properly. If it doesn't deploy properly, it's going to be one of the most expensive tragedies in the history of mankind, I think. So, Deep Sky Dude with the updates. They're loading the fuel into JWST, James Webb Space Telescope. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I was listening to a couple of updates on it this afternoon myself. How do you feel about fish fingers and custard? Oh, right. I'm glad Mom's expanding everyone's vocabulary in the chat and teaching them multi-syllabic ways to politely curse. Gross. Yeah, Deep Sky Dude again. We're going to see, we're going to see other planets forming with this thing. Indubitably, we will. And because these planets that we will see forming will be so far away, these will be planets that will be further along in their planetary evolution than the snapshot that we get of them. Because, of course, even as I'm speaking to you right now, the voice that you're hearing and the light that you're seeing is on a little bit of a delay. Well, anything that you see through a telescope is on a similar delay. Anything that you see with this telescope focused that far out into space is going to be on an even bigger delay. One of the coolest things that this is going to show us is formations of galaxies that are almost as old as the universe itself. And that'll be neat to see. Yeah, we're going to learn so much. Let's hope it works indeed. And, I've just got to say, one of the age-old arguments against exploration in general, but more specifically against space exploration, is people who cynically say, we have so many problems here on Earth. Why don't we spend that money fixing the things here? Well, the answer to that is because the problems here on Earth are never going to be solved to anyone's satisfaction. It is a constant, like if you were to put all the money spent on the James Webb telescope, and it wasn't all funded by the United States, by the way, if you were to put all the money that went into the development of the James Webb telescope into just like feeding people, there would be some other problem that people would say the exact same thing about. The goalposts would constantly move. And we are already being absolutely embarrassed, passed up by China in everything mathematical or scientifically based. Like we're still the economic superpower, but in terms of growth, holy crap, they are killing us in terms of growth and in terms of like scientific understanding and basic education amongst their populace. And the way to ensure that that is absolutely the way to be passed up is if we completely eliminated ourselves from space exploration. If we just let the Chinese have that and try to fix everything domestically, it's an absolute sure road into the new dark ages. And that's not even addressing all of the things that we get as a result, as like secondary results of developing space travel. And this is going to range all the way from things that you can't see from here, like new medicines, to like silly practical things like Velcro and WD-40. These like the things that funding space exploration gives us, not to mention the inspirational value for the next generation to go into math, science, physics, engineering. Even if they don't do anything with space exploration, that's what we need to do to stay competitive as a global economy. So yeah, spend the money on space exploration. There's a lot of other things that are wasteful that we can cut back on, but not that. Okay. Oh dear, Paul. Hey, Brandon, Art Hard Studios. Yep, Christina. Cocaine's a hell of a drug. Okay. Amen. Amen indeed. All right, I'm going to cut it off there, and I mean it this time. So David's birthday show is tomorrow, right? And then let's see, is Amanda on Demanda on Wednesday? Yeah. Yeah, Meg. Not going into any of that exactly. Oh, Amanda on Demanda is going to be a 1960s theme. And David's birthday show in his birthday suit. Right on, Bella. Yeah. Okay, and I will see you for Lovecast 83 on Thursday at 6 o'clock. I love you all. Keep reading and stay curious.